Boys, the news came in over the weekend. It's been a little bit since we've had since we've gotten together to record, but the news came in since last time we recorded. Kevin Durant traded to the Houston Rockets. The Wolves, however you want to look at it, they either missed out or they thankfully passed on the chance to acquire Kevin Durant. So now the question is, and I'll lay this out to you guys, what's next for the Timberwolves in an offseason where there's a lot of questions certainly facing the franchise after two straight trips to the Western Conference Finals, in which they got smoked in both of those series, if you want to look at it that way. So what's next for the Timberwolves? Will, I'll start with you, then Joe, then Tony.
Yeah, well, I mean, as far as the Durant thing goes, I said it in the lead up. If the Wolves got him, I was going to be excited. If they didn't, I was going to say, hey, we dodged a bullet. And that's what ultimately happened. I don't know how verifiable or valid the reports are of what was offered. Rob Dillingham or Terrence Shannon Jr., Dante DiVincenzo, Rudy Gobert, 17th overall pick. I don't know if that was actually offered. It seems like the Suns would have really wanted to do that, but I guess it probably wasn't on the table once the Wolves found out that Kevin Durant didn't want to be here. So I think it's good that they didn't trade for somebody who didn't want to be here. I do like the trade quite a bit for the Rockets with what that return was. But for the Wolves, I think you can't rule out Tim Connolly making another big move just because it wasn't Kevin Durant. They clearly had interest there. I think that was verifiably reported that the Wolves were very interested in the Kevin Durant idea, which tells me that Tim Connolly doesn't necessarily love just the run it back plan of, hey, let's bring back Julius Randle and Naz Reid, and maybe we lose Nah, and we draft a couple guys and we just run it back. Maybe that's what ends up happening because it'll be all about the value and potential deals that are out there. But I think Connolly is going to be making calls. Potentially, we could be talking about draft night calls. Maybe try to trade up. Maybe see what's out there for a deal involving draft compensation. But I want to see him go trade for a point guard. I've been saying that for a little bit since it sort of seemed like the Durant thing maybe wasn't going to happen in Minnesota. I don't know if that would be a De'Aaron Fox or a Darius Garland or Trae Young level like blockbuster star deal, or maybe like a go after a Kobe White or a Derek White or Alonzo Ball or somebody like that. But I think adding another ball handler who can allow Ant to play off the ball a little more, initiate offense, I think that could really help the Wolves. I know Rob Dillingham can be some of that too, as if you're high on him heading into year two, but I don't know if he's ready to start right now. I don't think Mike Conley's on the other end of being ready to start. So I think I would love to see them go after a lead guard to kind of shake things up heading into next season.
So it's been a while since we've had you on the program. Your thoughts on what happened with the Kevin Durant situation and what you see as the next move for Tim Connolly and the Minnesota Timberwolves?
Well, I think anytime you have a guy who doesn't want to sign a long-term extension and you're talking about punting on some young pieces, parts of your 2024 draft class who are really good in Rob Dillingham or Terrence Shannon Jr., that's a bad idea. I mean, it's really a one-year window for a championship then if you did trade for Durant, and the odds of that happening with his injury history and age and the stacked Western Conference were really low. What do you have? Maybe a 4-5% chance realistically to raise the trophy at the end of the season. I don't think that would have been worth it. If he were willing to sign a few-year deal, then maybe. But then again, if he's going to get $60 million a year, I don't think at that age and with those injury questions, you can really justify that. And if it required giving up Rudy Gobert, then your front court is Julius Randle and Kevin Durant and maybe Naz Reid. You're a sieve, and all of a sudden you're a defensive liability in the front court. So, yeah, I think they probably did dodge a bullet. But now, what's interesting is that it's just really quiet. I mean, there's nothing. There's no John Krasinski rumors. Mark Stein's barely mentioning the Timberwolves. Nobody's saying anything. I mean, it's left all of us out here to sit here and wonder what might be going on. And then if you think back to the reports from Brian Windhorst that Tim Connolly is going big game hunting this offseason, draft night is 24 hours away, guys, and you have to think that if something's going to go down, it could really go down on draft night. He's got ammunition. He's got young pieces. He's got contracts that are tradable. And there are teams that are shaking things up. So is it Derek White? Based on what Windhorst said on ESPN today, I doubt it because he doesn't think they'll move him. Is it Trae Young? Possibly. I mean, that would be amazing. Could he be going for Giannis? Doubt it. But I mean, holy crap. This is Tim Connolly we're talking about. The guy is willing to shock the world and have the results pay off. He's willing to take that big risk for the big reward. And it seems like he's right more often than not. So for me, though, it always goes back to De'Aaron Fox. I mean, if San Antonio's not going to trade the number 2 pick, they're not going to trade Stephen Castle, and they want to pair perhaps Dylan Harper, number 2 overall, with Castle and Wembanyama going forward. What are you doing with De'Aaron Fox? I get it. The more talent, the merrier, and he's awesome and on a pretty good contract. But if you're going to go get Dylan Harper, who's an absolute gem of a point guard prospect, what do you need De'Aaron Fox for when you can beef up your roster somewhere else? The question is, if you're the Timberwolves, what's it going to take? Can you sign and trade Naz Reid or Julius Randle and package them with Terrence Shannon Jr., Rob Dillingham, and picks to make that happen? Or do you have to give up Jaden McDaniels? And that's maybe where the buck stops with Tim Connolly. So I'm going back to De'Aaron Fox, and I'm sitting there in that well waiting for something to happen. But the fact that there's absolutely no smoke around those rumors, I don't know what to think of it. But it's pretty quiet. I just don't think it's going to stay quiet for much longer.
Correct me if I'm wrong. It was pretty quiet before the Randle Cat trade happened, right? There was literally no smoke about that, and then all of a sudden it just dropped one night. So the fact that it's gone quiet shouldn't really, I guess, say too much if you're thinking about how this organization has operated in the past, because I mean they've made big trades out of the blue before. So
can I
Tony,
just jump in here with the hilarious trade that just happened in real time while we're filming this? The New Orleans Pelicans are trading CJ McCollum, Kelly Olynyk, and a future second to the Wizards for Jordan Poole, Sadiq Bey, and the 40th overall pick.
Oh my God.
That is the most two terrible teams swapping low efficiency bucket getters going nowhere trade that I've ever seen.
Watch out for the Jordan Poole Zion duo.
Oh my God. You know what? There's going to be some nights where that team scores $160 and then they give up 170 and lose.
Yep.
That's amazing.
Anyways, and we had Drew Holiday last night. So it's starting to heat up a little bit here, and I think draft night, like you said, Joe, some big unexpected stuff could go down.
Yeah, Tony, I know. Quiet. These teams their lips are clearly sealed on what's happening. But every insider said this is going to be, I believe it was Shams who came out and said, the most craziest ever offseason, right? So is that going to happen? If it does, it's going to happen in the next 24 hours. At least that's when it really kicks off. And it, like Will said, it already is.
Tony, you've written a couple articles over on Timberwolves on SI about potential trades and what they could look like. So what do you from what you gathered and what you put together and read and wrote about, what's next for Minnesota?
Yeah, I have a lot of thoughts. The whole NBA offseason at this point is it's kind of annoying to me that I do think they glorify transactions so much. And it's like, why should we care that Jordan Poole got traded? That literally means virtually nothing in the grand scheme of things. And it won't affect the NBA whatsoever really at all for the next 10 years. But that's besides the point. The Kevin Durant thing, what I find really interesting with that whole situation, I had this thought last night that we heard for almost a year now that Durant and Anthony Edwards were best friends last summer at the Olympics, and they loved the idea of playing with each other, all this stuff. And then when it came time to do a trade, the Timberwolves seemed, by all reports, very interested in doing it. And then Kevin Durant just like, I don't really want to play in Minnesota. And I'm fascinated. People were just kind of like, oh, yeah, he just doesn't want to play for the Wolves. I want to know, like, why? Does he just hate the cold? Or, like, what was his idea there? Because it seemed like he really likes Edwards. Edwards really likes him. The Timberwolves wanted him. And the Timberwolves seemed to have the best package for a trade. And then Durant was just like, yeah, I don't know. I don't really want to play for them.
Did you see that 2010 Durant tweet that resurfaced, and it was literally about how cold it was in Minnesota? His face froze off. Yeah. And everybody's like, all right, this makes sense. The like we always talk about, the brain doesn't change. His mind is still back in 2010 in Minnesota. It's cold, man. He doesn't want to be here. Why? his preferred destinations all happen to be south of whatever line of
Yeah.
longitude that is, but it's San Antonio, Houston, and Miami. They're all way down south. The man wants to be in warm weather.
Like, I would love someone to ask him. We have all these insiders that are giving us all these scoops that virtually mean nothing, and then no one just like, hey, why don't you want to play in Minnesota?
Somebody could
'Cause
just tweet at him. He replies to randoms on Twitter all the time.
And for a guy who
That's
who
true.
wants to be liked as much as he clearly does, it's surprising that he wouldn't want to come here where the fan base would wholeheartedly love a superstar who came here via trade. It feels like it's wild.
Yeah,
I'm excited for Wolves Rockets next year because I think Ant's gonna have a little something extra for him.
Yeah. So will that fan base.
You don't want to be here. All right, I'm gonna dunk on you, like I did in Team USA practice.
Yeah, but I agree with what Will and Joe said and kind of our whole conversation we've had, that it does seem quiet, but that almost makes me think that I'm almost more confident that Tim Connolly is cooking something up. And there's plenty of options out there. I like the Kobe White idea. Even a lower risk move, I like the Lonzo Ball idea, and maybe get essentially a bridge point guard between Mike Conley and Rob Dillingham, because if they do want to compete for a championship next year, throwing in a 19, 20-year-old Dillingham might be a risky move. And he might take a leap, and you might not need to do that. So maybe a guy like Lonzo Ball, where you're not risking too much, but maybe he's not ready, and maybe you use him in a trade and just completely restarted that position with a big name like Trae Young or Darius Garland. So I definitely think the point guard's the direction they need to go.
Yeah, let's talk about your idea you wrote about on Timberwolves on SI. It was Kobe White coming to Minnesota, and then just kind of the bare bones of it would be DiVincenzo and Dillingham back to Chicago. The money works. The Wolves lose a little bit, right? But what if you could give up like Leonard Miller instead of Dillingham? Because the risk the Wolves are taking here is you're losing a really young, prized lottery pick who might be De'Aaron Fox a few years from now, to get a guy who there's no guarantee he signs long term. So if you make that trade for sure with Chicago, you have to know that Kobe White is signing an extension to be your point guard for the next 3 or 4 or 5 years. Otherwise, you cannot give up Dillingham, right? You can't even give up Terrence Shannon in that deal, I don't think.
Yeah, it's definitely would be a fascinating outlook, being that Kobe White only has 1 year left on his deal, because I'll be honest, I didn't watch much Chicago Bulls games, but I know that Josh Giddey was predominantly running the offense as their true point guard, and Kobe White did average 20 points per game. Obviously,
he's a bucket.
Great team, but they snuck into the play-in. I think they were the 10 seed. And he would be a really interesting player next to Edwards. I don't know if he's a true point guard, but he's averaged over 5 assists per game 1 year in his career. And I think he would give a little bit more facilitating than Dante DiVincenzo did next to Ant. But it would be a lot of the same things. So I don't know if it would be a home run deal by any means, but you could talk me into it. You could talk me out of it. If it was Dillingham and DiVincenzo, but like you said, I think you need him to sign an extension, because the unknown of Dillingham right now for the long-term future of the Wolves is just a really interesting aspect to the next 4 to 5 years. If he is something, if they try to turn him into something, if they try to trade him for something, it'll be an interesting storyline to follow.
When we talk about Wolves trade scenarios, and when going back to the Durant conversation, it was always one of Rudy Gobert or Julius Randle mixed in that trade talk, because obviously if you're going to get a superstar, you have to trade a superstar. So Will, when you look at both of those guys, who's most likely not to be here next season? I know Julius Randle has the contract situation that they have to figure out, but with how much his name has popped up in these trade conversations, clearly there's a thinking that he might be back potentially. Who's most likely not here next year between Julius Randle and Rudy Gobert?
I still think it's probably Randle, because he's like you said, the player option. He can't really just opt out of the player option and test the market, because the Nets are like the only team with cap space out there. He's not going to get more than the $31 million on the open market because teams just don't have it this offseason. But I think there's a situation where he opts in and gets extended and then winds up traded. I obviously that could happen with Gobert as well, but I think that they like Gobert, what he does to raise the floor on defense. I think if you're talking about trading for a point guard, that could be a situation that helps kind of maximize Rudy Gobert a little bit more. I think I have my complaints about Rudy Gobert. I've sort of advocated that they should trade him this offseason while his value is still pretty high, just because the offensive stuff can be so frustrating. The rebounding really dropped this year. But I think if you were to bring in a point guard like a De'Aaron Fox or a Trae Young, or even like Alonzo Ball or Tyus Jones type of bridge guy, Wolves fans don't seem to have soured on Tyus Jones. He had a bad year last year, but I'm still biased because he's from here. But I think that somebody like that could maximize Gobert a little bit more by throwing lobs the way that like only Mike Conley seems to do. Cat used to do it actually before he got traded, but one of the issues with Gobert is Anthony Edwards has the ball in his hands all the time and has thrown like 5 lobs to Rudy Gobert in 3 seasons. Like, it's just not something that he looks to do or maybe knows how to do. I don't know, combination of the two. But I still think if of Randle and Gobert, Randle is more likely to not be here, but could certainly go either way. I mean, they could both be back, and they could run it back, and that might not be exciting, but sometimes the best trades that are the ones that you don't make. So it's possible that they won't make
what
any
a
big
cliche. Oh my God.
It's true though. It's true. I think in some situations it can be true. So there's an argument to run it back. They do have the 17th pick, the 31st pick, which are really intriguing assets to add some young talent. You could add a point guard and a center, or whatever the value is. But yeah, it'll be very interesting to see what happens over the next 48 hours even.
Well, Julius Randle has a basketball camp in Rosemount in the Twin Cities Metro coming up in August. So a lot of people are already saying, well, it looks like Julius Randle knows he's going to stay here.
Definitely can't cancel a basketball camp. That's never happened before.
Yeah, and you can't fly in from on your private jet to get back in the middle of the summer. That'd be tough too. So this franchise traded Cat in the middle of the freaking night, and he had no idea it was coming. So I don't think Julius Randle can ever have a sense of security, nor can Rudy Gobert or Dante DiVincenzo. There's basically 2 guys on this roster that know they're not getting dealt, and that's Anthony Edwards and Jaden McDaniels.
Are those the only 2 for you, Joe?
I think so.
That you kind of paced as untradeable. They're not going to move this offseason.
I just think they're so high on them. I mean, when you hear Chris Finch and Tim Connolly talking about Jaden taking the step to like 2-way stardom, that's a guy on a good contract. I mean, the guy's on a great contract right now. You know, what is he making? $26 million a year for a couple more seasons. That is a bargain compared to what a lot of guys who are below his caliber are even making. So tremendous deal. They're not going to deal him unless, it's a mega name like Giannis. If you get Giannis, sure, you would consider it, obviously. But the next level guys like a Darius Garland or a De'Aaron Fox, I'm not sure that the Wolves can look at any of them and say they bring that kind of value on both ends of the floor that Jaden McDaniels does. So I do think there are basically 2 untouchables. And if they weren't going to give him up for Kevin Durant, I don't think they're going to give him up for really anybody outside of Giannis.
I personally don't want the Wolves to trade Terrence Shannon Jr. or really Rob Dillingham. I just think doing so after 1 year with some of the flashes you saw from Shannon and some of the flashes you saw from Dillingham, and also the conviction that you had to trade up with this 2030 first and a 2031 swap to go to the 8th overall pick and take Dillingham, to then bail on that after 1 year because he didn't get to play a ton on a team that made it to the Western Conference Finals and had this clear-cut 8-man rotation.
Yeah.
And to me, that would be, unless it's, they neither are untouchable by any means, because you just would talk about the return that would be coming in if it's a star point guard or whatever the case is. But for the most part, like generally speaking, I think the Wolves should hang on to both of those guys because I think that they could be really good long-term fits around Ant and Jaden.
I will say
gonna-
this too, real quick, Jonathan. Like, you have to adore and appreciate a 19-year-old point guard who, by all accounts, was the last guy in the gym working out from every NBA beat reporter who happened to go to Mayo Clinic Center and watch these guys practice. I mean, he was the last guy in the gym every single time I looked at X. And he's just shooting threes, working on his game. I mean, the desire to be great is there. Anthony Edwards says he reminds him of himself when he was young, and we all know how dedicated to the game Ant is. I think that's something you can't overlook. And then the ability he had as a youth and then in college and then flashed as a rookie in the NBA, it's like the sky high ceiling is there, right? That's why if you trade him in a package for a guy like Kobe White, you better be getting Kobe White for 5 years on a good contract, because Dillingham could come and bite you in the ass in the future as a potential all-star point guard.
That was going to be Will's kind of just reading my notes, apparently, is my next question of how comfortable are you guys with the idea of trading Dillingham or Terrence Shannon Jr. because of how often those names have appeared in trade conversations. Tony, what's your level of comfort? Obviously, Will's not too high on that idea, but what's your level of comfort of trading those guys if you're bringing in a star to help this team get over the Western Conference title or the Western Conference Finals slump that they've been in over the past 2 years?
Yeah, it is a really interesting discussion, because I agree with Joe that I still think Dillingham has a huge ceiling, all-star potential, and he's a guy that if you do trade him 5 years from now, we could be like, why the heck did a team trade him? I don't know if he's in the same SGA territory, but the Clippers willingly traded him and for Paul George, and looking back, that looks absolutely ridiculous. So, I not saying it's in that territory at all, but it could be a similar situation. And then Terrence Shannon Jr., I mean, we saw it in the end of that Thunder series, and I think it'll be really interesting to see how he fits into the system as more of a everyday rotational guy, because he had the ball in his hands a ton at Illinois in college, but he's not much of a facilitator. He's a true scorer, and he's a great defender, but we saw how well he played off the ball at the end of the Thunder series. So, I don't know if he's a 3 or a 2, so he could be your 6 man. But he's a guy that you kind of want to find out, because he is still relatively young. He was an old rookie, but you like that mystery when you're a team like Minnesota. So it all matters what the deal is. I think we've seen that Tim Connolly, I think, wouldn't bat an eye if he likes the deal if both of those guys were leaving. But it's hard to say unless you know what you're getting in return.
For sure. Final question to close out the show today. Let's just have a little fun here. What's the trade that you want to see happen? Who's the player that you want to see the Wolves, if they are, as has been reported, going big game hunting? Just use what you know, use what you've read here. Doesn't have to make sense, because obviously this is just on the fly right now. What's the trade that you want to see happen? Who's the player that you want to see the Timberwolves acquire here this offseason? Will, Joe, then Tony.
Yeah, I'm just Googling Trae Young's contract right now. That's who I'm interested in. It's a big contract. I can't get Spot Track to load here, but my deal, I don't know if this works. We'll have to go on the trade machine. It's going to be based around Julius Randle leaving and Trae Young coming in, and we're probably going to have to give up more than Julius Randle. Probably Dante, maybe one of the rookies that we've talked about, maybe 17. I just think Trae Young, for all of the maybe polarizing elements to his game during his career in Atlanta, he is a top 5 or 6 point guard in the league, top 30-ish player in the league. The assist numbers are crazy. He can shoot. He hasn't necessarily been super consistent efficiency-wise from 3, I think because of the volume and whatnot. But him next to Anthony Edwards, allowing Ant to play off the ball more, and then keeping Rudy Gobert in this hypothetical, like Rudy Gobert would probably run a lap of happiness around his block if the Wolves traded for Trae Young, because somebody would actually throw him some lobs in the pick and roll. I just think a starting lineup of Trae Young, Anthony Edwards, Jaden McDaniels, Rudy Gobert, and then we'll figure out who the fifth is, whether that's Naz Reid, whether that's Terrence Shannon Jr., Nickeil Alexander-Walker if he were to be back. I don't know. But the basis of Trey, Ant, Jaden, and Rudy, I think you could win a championship with that group.
From what I pulled up.
Wouldn't be easy to acquire, but I think it's doable because the Hawks have been kind of treading water as like the annual play-in participants. It's the Atlanta and Chicago Invitational and the Eastern play-in. I think they got to make a move. I don't know how Julius Randle gets them out of the play-in necessarily, but you know what? I haven't thought about all this, so that's my basic idea.
From what I pulled up, Trae Young's contract $45.9 million next year, and then he's got a player option 26-27 for $48.9.
That's fine. We'll take it.
You want to know what's really interesting?
We'll extend them.
I just stumbled upon this, but do you know what two contracts equal exactly $45.9 million?
Julius and Dante?
Julius and Naz Reid.
Oh.
So if Naz Reid were to pick up his option and Julius does the same, you could trade them straight up for Trae Young and maybe throw in some draft capital, obviously, if you're the Wolves, to get a perennial all-star like Trae Young. But you could also figure out some sign-in trades here to make it even more complex. But I'm just saying, the money is exact. And then the Hawks would have a couple of
I want to keep Naz Reid, though.
Huh?
I want to keep Naz Reid.
You're probably giving up Dillingham in that deal as well, so it's got to get more complicated than that. But that to me is fascinating because you don't lose Rudy Gobert. You can use, draft assets or the mid-level exception on a big to back up Rudy Gobert. Man, Trae Young next to Anthony Edwards would be insane. I still think De'Aaron Fox makes the most sense just because of the situation in San Antonio and having the number 2 pick, which is going to be Dylan Harper. Where do you slide him next to Stephen Castle and De'Aaron Fox? I think Fox has got to go, and I think he would love it here in Minnesota. And we do know that there was interest in the past with Tim Connolly and the Wolves and De'Aaron Fox. It just makes way too much sense. So find a way to make that happen. That is my dream scenario. Because
I still want to definitively know if De'Aaron Fox is eligible to be traded or if there's like that 6-month rule since he was last traded. I can't find a straight answer to that, but
there's all kinds of crazy rules. Like if Julius Randle in a sign and trade, he can't make more than 5% more than he makes with his $30.9 million player exception if the Wolves are going to trade him. He literally can't be traded until I think December 15th it is, that whole deal, if his raise in a sign and trade is more than 5%. So there's so many different weird elements in the CBA that makes these things very complex when you're dealing with player options and potential free agency. But, that's what Fanspo and Trade Machine is for, and we're just here for it. I'm enjoying it.
Yeah, I think in Will's hypothetical, or even Joe's, if you throw in Naz Reid to that deal, I think I'm not sure if the Hawks are dying to have a big three of Zachary Sachet, Julius Randle, and Naz Reid, but he talked me into the Trae Young.
That's some Jalen Johnson disrespect right there, too.
Oh, yeah. How could I forget? But Will talked me into the Trae Young idea. That as a pipe dream, that sounds awesome. He's a player that, I've definitely am in that polarizing group that there are times I can't stand watching him, but he's exciting, and if the Wolves still had all those defensive pieces, I think they could.
Trey in Minneapolis, come on.
I think they could.
Branding fits. Come on.
Yeah,
they could overcorrect his defensive liability a little bit, and it would be interesting. But I think I'm still stuck on the Bulls. I think the Wolves should do a trade with them. They have a lot of guards with Lonzo and Kobe White, and I could see them wanting to get rid of one of them. And it might not be flashy like a De'Aaron Fox or Trae Young deal, but I think that's the type of move that the Wolves need to make to get over the hump. We just saw the Pacers make such a deep run with just a really solid roster, not anything flashy. And I think the Wolves have a lot of stuff that works, and I think they just need a few more tweaks to get over the hump.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to all this coverage of the Timberwolves over on Timberwolves on SI because has as has been reported, the Wolves are reportedly big game hunting. We'll see what that means after losing out or passing on Kevin Durant, however you want to view it.
And we didn't even talk about the NBA draft, but go read our coverage of that. Shout out to the Danny Wolfs and Cedric Cowards and
they're not even going to have a pick.
Kalkbrenners of the world. Well, maybe they won't. Maybe they won't.
They're going to trade that thing in a blockbuster.
They're going to trade 17, 31, Julius Randle, Naz Reid, Rob Dillingham to the Mavs for Cooper Flag. Just kidding. The Mavs would never do that.
Oh, my God.
That would be wild.
Man, Nico Harrison, though, you never know.
I can't believe that Giannis is going to be wearing a Wolves uniform in 24 hours. That's crazy.
Tomorrow night.
Crazy.
Draft tomorrow night. Plenty of coverage over on Timberwolves on SI of that, obviously, and of all the offseason shenanigans that are sure to take place for Minnesota. Go also read all the rest of our work over on Vikings, Twins, and Gophers on SI as well, covering it for you all. Hit subscribe to the channel. It does help us get found. So notifies you every time we post a new video here to the channel. We'll talk to you tomorrow with another topic across Minnesota sports. Talk to you then.